Okay, Jenny, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Okay, today's podcast is not sponsored by Topo Chico, but I'm a big fan of Topo Chico these days. I have to be a fan of something.
Be a fan.
And look, it only has 10 calories.
They're good.
Sparkling mineral water, which I don't know, like what makes it mineral water? Do they put minerals in it? Do they source it with minerals? Carbonated water.
They put the minerals in.
Hibiscus extract, potassium sorbate. I don't see anything about minerals on here, do you? It's got sodium, magnesium.
Yeah.
It's,
Maybe that's part of the carbonation.
It's made by Coca-Cola. What do we think? Think it's good for you?
I don't know if it's good for us, but it tastes good.
I mean, it only has 10 grams of sugar, so like...
When?
Yeah.
I have my backup coconut water. You're so kind.
Oh, have you tried this out, Cocoa Love?
I'm going to take it.
Okay, so these guys, well, some of the co-owners actually live in Bloomington.
Oh.
Which is down the street from me, right?
Yeah.
Well, I live in Bloomington, but they're like down the street from me. So I think it's kind of fun, and they've gotten really, really big. So this is even in Walmart now.
That's cool.
So Cocoa Love.
Look.
I just think it's always cool to be like repping some peeps, you know?
Especially local. That's cool.
Yeah, kind of. I bet you didn't know that, did you?
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm. They actually did give me like a couple cases, so we could say that it's sponsored by Cocoa Love.
We could.
We could. This podcast. Well, this podcast, we're going to talk about trauma and addiction. So I invited the smartest person I knew on my podcast, and here she is. This is Jennie.
Hello.
Jennie Pool. So you are a therapist or what? Like what's...
Mental health therapist. Clinical mental health therapist.
What do you have a degree in?
Master's degree in clinical mental health therapy. So there's 3 different degrees. There's social workers and marriage and family counselors, and then clinical mental health therapists or counselors or LPCs, which are like licensed professional counselors. And then you have your doctorate's degrees, which are PsyDs and PhDs.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So you like therapy people?
Yes, I do therapy with people. That's my main thing is trauma therapy.
It now?
It is, and I do a lot of somatic trauma therapy, which means we get in with the body, not just what's happening in the mind.
Yeah, let's talk about somatic therapy for a second, because it's an interesting topic to me, but a lot of times when I see somatics, I don't know why, I just have this picture of like weird sexual things. I don't know why.
Maybe that's like tantrums. Tantrumatics? I'm just kidding. Well, somatics, so soma, if you break the word up, soma means body.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you hear anything with soma or in it, it's going to be talking about the body. So somatic is therapy connected. It's a word to use to connect to something that's happening in the body, the physical body. So if we're talking about the mental body, the emotional body, and the physical body, if you're doing somatic therapy, then you're referencing doing therapy that includes the physical body.
Okay, so what is that?
So a lot of...
I'm like, that's really nice, that sounds really nice.
Yes.
So like, are we like dancing?
So some of the
around?
things that people would know, well, you could dance. That would be a somatic therapy.
Okay.
People can dance, they can shake. When you look at some of the modalities out there, a lot of people are familiar with EMDR, where you utilize like bilateral movement of the eyes. Brain spotting is a derivative of EMDR.
I have a client who does that. That's the only reason I know what it is. And I think I told you that, yeah.
Yep. I do brain spotting. That's what I'm trained in as far as like a somatic modality, but I'm also a structural bodywork therapist, so I have a license in that as well. So I do quite a bit of hands-on work as well to help release. So when we talk about trauma, it's not just what happens in the mind, what gets encapsulated, it gets encapsulated in the body as well. And if you're just talking about something and you're never really releasing it, what I would say from the very cells of the body, like getting it out of not just the mental body, the emotional body, you've got to get it out of the physical body. The body stores trauma, the body keeps score. Bessel van der Kolk wrote that book. A lot of people are familiar with that book. If they haven't read it, they're at least familiar with the phrase. The body keeps score.
I am familiar with the phrase, have not read the book.
Yeah. It's pretty technical. It's like reading a textbook, but he has a lot of, I would say, YouTube videos that are more digestible. I'm not saying don't read his book, but you're definitely going to feel like you're reading something very technical. He talks about a lot of neurobiology, neuroplasticity, what's happening in the body, and he's a big researcher. So, but his work, I would say, has really a big part of paving the way of helping people understand why somatic therapy is so important, because what's happening in the mind is also happening in the body, and you have to release both. You have to slough all of that off so the body can reclaim safety.
Yeah, I've been over to your office, and you do have like that traditional like, you know, couch which I always call that like circle talking. I know therapy's really great. I've gone to therapy for years and years,
Yeah.
but now I've gotten to the point where I could like talk myself in a circle and I'm like, okay, cool, I've got this, goodbye. But so you have the traditional couch, but then you also do the body work, which I saw you for body work, and you're phenomenal.
Thank you.
How do you describe that though? Because people are always like, what is it? And I'm like, oh, I just got a girl.
Yeah, it does some things and helps me feel. So I'll explain like this. It's different than deep tissue or massage. Structural body work is done where you find where an adhesion or knot is in the muscle, and you're able to kind of manually force or push the body to let go of it. When you get that adhesion out of the muscle, now you've increased functionality, mobility, range of motion, and the muscle can perform properly. So if you have an adhesion in your scapula, like your shoulder, it's not going to work as well for you. When you get that out, now it has more freedom to move and function how it's supposed to.
So what I'm kind of wondering though is if people come to you, and this is kind of what therapy really should look like, right? Is they come to you, they can talk about it, they can do the couch talk, but then you're like, hey, maybe you're holding on to this in a particular area of your body, let's work it out. Is that kind of?
Yes. And the thing that's beautiful about somatic therapy is there's a lot, like I have the flexibility and beauty of having 2 licenses, which allows me to do more in my scope of practice. Therapists that aren't going to put their hands on a client, but can still do somatic therapies. So there's somatic movements that people can do. You can get people to tremor, like shake the body, shake it out of the body. There's so many tools that you can use. EMDR does it where your EMDR and brain spotting extrapolate files. Okay, when we have stuff that's entangled in our psyche, that
I'm just gonna stick this mic down here.
Okay.
Are you used to having things in your face?
I'm not. So when you're extrapolating that from the nervous system, the psyche, there's an unwinding that happens, and brain spotting and EMDR will take that. Our eyes are really the window to the soul. So the beautiful thing about that modality or those modalities is it's like pulling a file, okay, and like playing it. And then as you play it, you're noticing what's happening in the nervous system, and you're helping people breathe, like somatically breathe through it and breathe it out. Because somatic breathing is a way to move energy, that debris out the body. So you can untangle people without ever having to put your hands on them. So somatic therapy, I'll just say this, it's a huge wave coming into mental health, and I think that in the future, every therapist is going to need some kind of somatic tool to help increase the efficacy of mental health, because people can talk and talk and talk, and then they can also re-injure themselves in the talking. Like if you're just talking about an injury, but you're not healing and repairing it by sloughing off what you need to, you're recirculating it.
No, I completely agree with that because, again, I'm very familiar with talk therapy, but then I feel like when I would leave, I would be so triggered, like my nervous system. So I felt like my nervous system was never calming down.
Yeah.
I felt like I always had adrenal fatigue every time I left.
Because there's not reclamation of safety. So the body wants that homeostasis, which is its happy place. So if you're going to play, like if I had you watch something that was really scary to you, your nervous system would be challenged. And if I was like, well, cool, have a good night, you'd be like, I'm going to have a hard time sleeping. Because we've now challenged your nervous system and we haven't brought it back to a safe place. So when you're doing trauma, and this is why you have to really pay attention to window of tolerance. The window of tolerance for people to do trauma work has to be there. It has to be honored. And if it's not open, then we work on grounding and coping mechanisms till the window of tolerance is open. Then we do trauma work. And when you're viewing and treading these what I call sacred, tender spaces with people, they need to have coping and grounding. I'm in a safe place, I'm with a safe person, it's safe to heal and repair from this. And then when the nervous system is done, like you gotta move them out. You gotta move them out of the trauma work and ground. And that's what somatic therapy does. That's why I have the sound table, the vibroacoustic sound table.
Yeah, you have a cool table.
It grounds people, it emits the theta and the delta waves so that they can get grounded in about 20 to 30 minutes.
Do you have one of those at home? Like, do you sleep on it?
I do. I want one.
I feel like you could do some cool shit on your ground.
I know. One of these days I'll have one at
Hey,
home.
baby.
I mean, let's all just spend time on this table. They're great tools. They can be expensive, and there's sophisticated equipment, and I think that they're going to get better and better at making them, and they're going to be more and more cost effective. But they're great tools. I could just do the vibroacoustic sound table and help repair people's nervous system, and they're going to be able to have way more tolerance and bandwidth in life.
Oh, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Tolerance and bandwidth.
So that's what you're doing when you're reclaiming safety in the nervous system, is you're getting that bandwidth and that tolerance back to having more equilibrium so you can do life. And that's what trauma does, is that it eats up the bandwidth. And so if you could imagine, I think you guys did this on the last podcast, but pinballs like spinning around, if you had 1, 2, drop 3 or 4, it's taking up so much life energy to keep those going while you're still trying to do life. That's why trauma can, especially when those injuries get awakened and people all of a sudden remember things, and they can be really debilitating because all of a sudden their life energy is just sapped by that stuff.
I've got to give like kudos to people who are like just going through recovery from addiction and have real jobs. Because I'm like, oh, I have a lot of time to myself, so like, yeah. I mean, I have a lot of work I have to do, but it's very, obviously self-paced here.
Right.
Like, I can do it. I have appointments sometimes like this, but I look forward to these things. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, I was having a total fucking mental breakdown yesterday, and it's like when you also have to go to work, because it's not like I've had high stress jobs. Like I've worked in healthcare, I've done a lot of crazy shit, Mm-hmm. But I was like, oh, I can't imagine like and I was even thinking back to how I used to feel when you just have a bad day.
Yeah.
It's like you have to get up and you were not allowed to show that at work.
Yeah.
So I was like, dude, kudos to all of you guys in real jobs.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the reasons why stress management in sobriety is so important, because it's the stressors. Again, bandwidth. If your bandwidth gets ruptured, your body's going to pull for coping. And there's a lot of what we call adaptive coping mechanisms or maladaptive ones.
Okay, let's define these. Okay, so I was like, you used a word I've never heard of. Maladaptive.
Maladaptive versus adaptive. So an adaptive coping mechanism that you've created in your life is running, right? Could that become a maladaptive coping mechanism if you just ran like 10 hours a day? Mm-hmm. Sure, right? Like anything in moderation versus excess, like you could start pummeling your body and create injuries, but you do it because it's healthy for you and you do it in a way that works for you. And so it's an adaptive coping mechanism for you. It does a lot for you to bring all different kinds of levels of health in your body, the mental, the emotional, the physical, right? Mm-hmm. A maladaptive one would be like, I've had a flippin' long day, a bunch of crap happened today, and let me just pour open the wine bottle and just go to town.
Oh, well, that's my special advice. That's why we're here today.
Yeah. So, and again, is the wine itself this evil vessel of liquid death? No. Someone can have a glass of wine and be like, hey, that took off the edge and I feel good.
I don't like those people anymore, that's you.
3 bottles of wine later and never dealing with your feelings. So I listened to something really interesting. I was excited to share this on this podcast. Emotions are connected to being peptides. So there's this huge rage in the world right now about peptides. Mm-hmm. There are these chemical reactions in the body that help the cells open up, the cells be more functional, all this stuff. You can have peptides for your skin, you can have peptides for supplements, okay?
You can inject them right into yourself.
Right. So the peptides, and if emotions are peptides, when you feel an emotion, you want to metabolize it. And you want to process it. You want to notice what you're feeling in your body, and you want to, again, this is tolerance, okay? The reason people go into addictions and we're reaching for coping, we're reaching for blunting, numbing, I just want to flip and deal with this, right? And those can turn into addictions because instead of learning how to soothe ourselves and work through and feel what we need to feel, metabolize the emotion, and then we get through it, right? Versus if we don't metabolize the emotion, we store it.
Okay, I like the way you just described all that. And it feels like kind of sciencey, but it makes sense because everyone's like, let your emotions come up and feel them. And I'm like, what the?
Yeah.
I would say the last week I've just been so angry, and so I was watching videos about sobriety and anger and just let yourself feel the emotion. And I was like, what?
Yeah, you're like, I want to, right?
But no, that makes sense to me though, like letting yourself metabolize the emotion because I can understand that. My brain can make logical sense of that. Like you put in food, you metabolize it, turn it into energy, right. And you either use the energy or you shit it out.
Right. And if you don't metabolize your emotions, that's where they get stored and encapsulated, right?
Wild.
So when you think about it that way, you go, okay, if it's uncomfortable and as much as annoying, or I don't want to have to feel this, or I don't want to have to cry right now, it's so important to metabolize and move through those emotions because then you're moving through them rather than like keeping them all inside, and then they become a perfect storm.
Oh, I'm really good at those. I haven't had one of those for a while, and I had one
Yeah.
yesterday where I was like, here, it was the spiral.
Yeah.
One more. Suddenly, I hate my kids. Suddenly, I'm going to get a divorce.
Yeah,
Suddenly,
everything.
yeah, and I was like, divorce? Like, that's a weird word that's popping in your head, but I know it's not me, you know? It's not even how I actually feel. I was like, well, this is a wild ride.
Yeah, like what is happening right now?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the bandwidth getting like, that's you're hitting the edges of your bandwidth or blowing it. When the bandwidth's blowing, everything can be irritable. It's the range of emotions, but they're all now big. The pendulum's swinging, there's no emotional regulation, and it's just whipping around. So you're just kind of whipping around on the ocean, and there's no regulation, right? But that's why learning tools to reclaim safety in your nervous system as you manage your emotional health. And here's the thing, when they need to have this class in like schools and high school, is emotional regulation classes. Like, what were your skills? Like, were you taught as a kid how to emotionally regulate well? Were you taught emotional intelligence? So then as you get into the more challenges of life, if your baseline of coping skills and emotional regulation skills isn't great, what are you going to do? You reach for things that make you feel better quickly.
Okay, so what is the direct link? This is my biggest question. What is the direct link between like severe trauma? So should we use like a childhood traumatic event? You know, and I think like say something extremely severe happens, like either you're sexually molested or like maybe your mom dies or something like big in childhood. Because I know there's everyone has childhood trauma, and I'm kind of overhearing about it. Do you feel like it's a buzzword right now?
Well, so if you study, one of the things I would tell your listeners if they really want to learn more about trauma, and so Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps Score, Gabor Mate, he wrote In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. And if you want to read about someone who really, I think, fundamentally changed the world of addiction and moving it from this medical model of disease versus it's trauma, it was him. And he wrote In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. And then
so what are you saying, realm?
Yeah, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts is the book's name.
Okay.
And then he also wrote The Myth of Normal. He also wrote other books, but The Myth of Normal is his new one. And this is more encapsulating, I think, in all of his work, but when he started within the realm of Hungry Ghosts, it was all about, wow, we are looking at addiction the wrong way. And when I read his work, I was like, geez, every sobriety and recovery center should be connected to his work, because it's so true about where the trauma connects to the addictions, right? And with childhood
Well, that's what I'm
traumas,
wondering is, you know, or maybe it wasn't even childhood, like maybe you're a teenager, maybe you're an adult, like, you know, soldiers that go to war. I know there's a high addiction rate there, especially with like Vietnam and things like that. Well, I just read this book about Vietnam vets, so it's at the top of my head. But like, what is the direct link between trauma and then people who turn to addiction?
Yeah, so it's the wanting to self-soothe quickly, right? So the thing about injuries when you can see them, like if I had a huge cut that needed stitches on my arm and I came in and all the stitches were there, you'd be like, that's a gnarly wound. And if it got reopened and reopened and reopened, I would be in a lot of pain.
Yeah, I'd be like, you should do something about that.
Yeah, or if I was reopening it or something in life was reopening it, that no matter what I did, it kept getting reopened. That's a trauma that is either getting awakened and touched on through some kind of experience. Like, our bodies are really incredible in that they're intuitive vessels and they will protect us. So a lot of times when our sense of safety in the world is ruptured one way or the other, okay, whether it's a microtrauma or a big trauma, our bodies will try and encapsulate it. And sometimes if it's bad enough, they'll hide it. They'll block it. That's why you'll have people that have significant childhood traumas go, I don't remember much of my childhood. Because the body's going, yeah, we don't want to.
Yeah, and that's the big piece I have is I don't remember a lot of chunks of childhood, and then I also don't remember chunks of when my daughter was little because I was in a severe traumatic experience relationship then. You know, it was physically and mentally abusive. And so I have a hard time remembering her as like a baby, and like I try to recall the memories and there's like a definite block. But some of the things I'm not remembering as a child, it's almost like I have like another being who comes into my presence and is like, you don't need to open the box. Yeah. But you do need to learn how to move through the box. Yeah. You know, and I'm like, good God, I've even like worked with a shaman like to move through these things, but I'm finding that it's continuously there and it's like I'm hitting a wall. Yeah. I'm not quite sure, like I don't need to relive it every single day. It was fucked up, you know, but like, how do you actually like, I don't know, how do you keep your body from just freaking the fuck out all the time?
That's where the somatics is the reclamation of safety in the very cells of your body. So the boxes don't always have to be open. Sometimes they do, right? What has to Because again, an injury that isn't healed festers. And if we saw the injury that was a fester, we're like, you need some help, like get on some antibiotics, right? Well, why aren't we doing that with our emotional body? Because we can't see it. And it's something that's very interpersonal that we're experiencing that oftentimes we don't want anyone else to know about. It's fine. It's not. There's a storm inside. And so as you, in your particular situation, you had a very clear part of you that was like, hey, we don't have to necessarily revisit every part of piecing this box, but there's something hanging in your nervous system that needs to be healed and repaired. So it's finding what that is and letting the body unwind. It's an unbinding that happens that allows the body to finally reclaim safety. I wasn't safe then, but I'm safe today. I'm in a safe place, I'm a safe person, and I'm safe today. And then the belief that the body can go, oh, we are safe today. And we can finally put a period on our past. And that's where, when you're traversing trauma, you have to really pay attention to, again, window of tolerance and say, how much of this exposure to the trauma do we need to revisit and help you understand and work through? And then let's get to the business of healing and reclaiming safety. Because the safety was ruptured. That's what created the trauma injury, is that your sense of safety in the world was ruptured, and if it was ruptured again and again and again, this nervous system is going, oh, I don't think the world's safe.
Yeah, and it's been kind of interesting, especially this time of year is typically when I go into my typical, like, I call it my holiday depression.
Mm-hmm.
And every year I'm like, oh, it's fine, I've healed so much, it's not coming. And then I'm like, oh, nope, it's here.
Yeah, yeah.
And it would be so great to not take that into my 40s.
Yeah. Well, and so that's some of the work that you can do, whether you do brain spotting with your friend or as we're doing some of even the body work. I have found that it doesn't matter if it's a micro trauma or a big trauma, the body wants equilibrium, and we can always find it. Like, I've said in front of people, like, this is dumb, you're not gonna find anything. And it's not necessarily me. I know how to hold space, but the body is what finds it. We're a big recording device. We've recorded every moment of our lives. It's recorded on the very cells of our body. And so if you say, okay, I want you to find it, we'll find it. Now, I've helped people find it, and they've gone, nope, I don't do this. Okay. We just reclaim safety, because and there is a delicate dance to saying, are we sure? Because you really want to heal and repair, and so are we avoiding? And is it time to push through some of that? Or, yeah, let's regroup and reground, and let's maintain safety, and let's get some better coping mechanisms on board, and then let's go back in.
Okay, so could you take me through a hypothetical situation? I don't know why I'm always like, these are great theories.
So to give you an example, I thought about this today. Yeah. This is more of a micro trauma, but it teaches about parenting and where we can do it well, and how quickly we can rupture the sense of safety in our little one's world. So my son, he's 16 now, he was 5. My mom had just moved into a new house, and they got a TV, and you know those like styrofoam things? So they had pulled out the styrofoam thing, and in the garage, they had taken all these tiny pieces, him and my older son.
Was it like those little tiny styrofoam balls?
Well, it was a big thing of styrofoam, and they made styrofoam balls.
So it's like floating in the air.
And so here's the thing about when I review what happened, I was like, man, I overreacted there. And ultimately, my mom's new house, I didn't want there to be a big mess. They made a huge mess. It was snow, right?
Yeah.
There's no snow in St. George, so we're gonna make it. How creative is that? Mm-hmm. Right? So if I had slowed myself down and be like, wow, you guys are so creative. This is so cute. And let me show you how to clean it up. That would have been the perfect parent response. But instead, I was like, oh my gosh.
I mean, I feel like that's just like kind of normal, right. Also.
Right.
You know?
So I'm human.
Yeah.
So I had a huge reaction, and my 5-year-old. So this is when you press, and to the degree that you create injury, right, or you get injured on the press. So, like, what are you guys doing? This is ridiculous. This is grandma's new house. I can't believe you did this. I didn't like slow myself down to see the joy that they were having, right? I just focused on, you shouldn't have been doing this. And my 5-year-old was like, it was him, no, it's him. And I was like, you made this choice, you did it, you're the one that, and that's the press, right? I was like, you, this is you. And it was crazy, because this part of me was like, what are you doing? But I was like expending my frustration, right? I was rolling all of that off of me. And my son was like, he just started to go, I don't know what to say. He's a 5-year-old. He doesn't have a lot of skills, right? So now he's dealing with my intensity. I had the better skill set, and I'm just like pummeling him with my frustration. And at one point he goes, well, I guess I'm stupid.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? No, you're not. So I immediately redirected and I was like, hey, I used all my skills at that moment, but it took seconds to rip into my kid, and it took me 5-7 hours to repair him. I had to keep working on it and had to keep revisiting with him, like, hey, I overreacted. Here's mom's doing her repair work, and what do we believe about ourselves? I believe that I'm smart. So that's a microtrauma to my kid. Like, did I rip into his sense of safety in the world so much so that I created a different belief system for him? Yeah. Could I have reinforced that over time? Like, here you are being stupid again. Can't we do that stupid thing? How often do we do that as parents, right?
Oh, I did it last night, yeah.
Yeah.
My son smashed his computer monitor.
Yeah.
He's garbage.
Yeah. So, and again, it's not that we don't give our kids consequences and
Yeah.
let them like learn from like choices, but in the moments we want to, when we've overreacted and we've disrupted the sense of safety. Now, that could have been an uncomfortable experience, but since I kept pressing, so it went from like, mom's mad, there's this uncomfortable experience happening to, I dug into his very like core and ripped it.
Yeah.
Right? So it was my job to come in and repair it, and I had the skills to do it, but a lot of people don't, right? They just
No,
let
I
their kid.
was gonna say, my parents would break me down till I was,
Yeah,
I am a horrible person, you're right, I am horrible.
And look, your belief system starts to build around low self-esteem, negative core beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're reinforced with those messages. And sometimes not necessarily purposely. It's not like, I think parents are sometimes like, oh, like, where can I be malicious today with my kid? But it was really an awakening moment for me to be like, man, I ripped my kid in 4 seconds, and maybe 10 seconds, and it took me 7 hours to repair him. And it created a microtrauma for him. I couldn't believe how long it took me to help him believe that he wasn't stupid.
Yeah.
And that he was smart. And I was like, man, I'm not gonna deal with this 10 years later and you know what I'm saying? Like, and not have said I did my due diligence to try and repair this. Now that's a micro trauma. Like, that's little.
Yeah.
Right?
And we've all experienced probably thousands of those moments.
Yeah. And so they're more repairable. And even though that took me 7 hours, think about sexual abuse. Like, you're invaded against your will, and you're usually told, if you tell anyone we're gonna hurt you or hurt somebody else, there's an intense self-suffocation. And so to really unwind that kind of stuff is such delicate work, but you can put a period on that. But that would be like a practical example of being able to go in and say, here's my voice. And that's where parts work comes in. It's really popular right now. You'll have like what's called IFS therapy, internal family systems. I don't think that's the only way to do parts work. I do parts work a lot of different ways, but we bring in those wounded parts, and start to give them a voice. Like, what do you need to say? And they don't know that you're 35 now. When they were 6, this was happening to them. And so the trauma's not linear. It's not keeping track of time. So you have to help that 6-year-old, that 12-year-old, that 8-year-old go, hey, I'm gonna release you from this emotional prison that you're in. And I'm gonna bring you into the present moment where we're safer and you can heal from this. And so that's where you come in and do that parts work. And you already kind of mentioned that, where you're having that part of you come in and go, hey sis, we don't have to, like, it's you talking to you, right? We don't have to come in and open this box, but we need to deal with the room that it's taking up in our psyche, mm-hmm. and how it's still causing us distress. And then that would be what you focus on.
Do you think that ever goes away, or is it just one of those things where it's like you see it and instead of it like taking the ship down, you're just like, oh, there it is.
More like that.
Thanks for being here.
Well, so an encapsulated trauma memory does this in the nervous system. It would be like pulling up a weed, and it's going like there's all that dirt.
Yeah.
When you're doing trauma work, you're pulling up that weed and you're shaking it off. And then you might still have some, but you have to take a break, right? Shake it off. By the time you've gotten that whole like root shaken off, then you can put a period on it. And now it's just a memory. You're not erasing memories, but it's not one that's taking up any bandwidth, and like it doesn't have any charge in it, right? It's not doing this. It's just there. And it's calm, it's neutral. Because now your system can believe that you truly are safe in the present moment. When we have trauma, your system's going, you may say that we're safe in the present moment, but we are still 6 and we're not safe. The nervous system is still living and so if it was 6 and if it was 8 and if it was 12, if you had multiple traumas, it's just a lot. It's happening. So like I said, you can put a period on the past. We're not erasing memories, just the memories won't have the charge. And so then it's just peace. and safety in the nervous system.
Yeah, it's like just part of your story versus like controlling every aspect of your life.
Yeah, and how you do some of that too, because some people don't go to therapy and they've had really bad traumas and they seem okay. It's how they resource themselves, right? It's the resources. And so when people have really good resources, they can really sometimes self-heal without having to do therapy, and they can find peace. They're like, hey, that's not bogging down my nervous system anymore. I found a way to regain my equilibrium, and now that's just a memory of my past that has no charge. So people can do that on their own. Sometimes it's just really hard and they need help.
Yeah. I know, I do find things fascinating, like, even if I just use my husband as an example, he's always calm, nothing bothers him. My favorite conversation with this man ever was, he's like, well, tell me what's going on in your head. And I was like, well, every day I feel like I wake up and I have to choose whether or not I'm going to live. I really don't see the point in life some days, and like, and I'm thinking we're having this, and he's like, wow, that's fascinating. And I'm like waiting for him to tell me his like inner secrets.
Yeah.
And he's like, what? And I'm like, so when do you wake up feeling like that? And he goes, I've never felt like that. And I'm like, you've never once been like, there's no, like, what is life or what's the point of it? And he's like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Yeah. Well, and so again, and you look at his system, and that's so unique about people, is we're all so different, and we all record and hold things differently. You could have two people in a helicopter crash, and one is much more okay through it.
Yeah,
as far as the aftermath.
They're like, it's a fascinating story, and the other person can't even drive a car,
They can, So again, it's really about what it takes to reclaim safety in the nervous system, and for that nervous system to believe that what happened at 6, what happened at 12 isn't what's happening today. And that's all the parts work, that's the somatics, you really have got to unbind. Like if we were working on a physical muscle and had a knot in it, you have to unbind it. So you have to unbind your emotional body and your mental body as well. They stay bound. And the cool thing about that's really starting to come out too, and this is why I think everyone's going to need somatic tools in the mental health field, is the fascia in our bodies wrapped around everything. And the fascia is like a highway of connectivity. It's like talking to your whole body. And so I've worked on like little ones that have like, my stomach hurts, Mom, I don't want to go to school, because they're anxious. And they don't know how to deal with the anxiety, they don't have tools. I've just simply worked on the fascia in their stomachs, and you start unbinding that and unwinding that, and all of a sudden their diaphragm can expand, and they can breathe, and they have room, and all of a sudden they realize that they're not having belly aches and stomachs and need to go to 17 doctors. They just had anxiety that's twisted up their insides, and you unbind it, and now they have freedom to be like, oh, life maybe isn't so hard and scary. You couple that with some good tools, right, about how to manage anxiety. These little ones, life is hard and intense, and sometimes they just don't know they don't have skills.
Yeah.
And so then they're like, well, I'm doing the best I can, and they get bound. And one more sensitive kid who has more sensitivities or tends to be more sensitive versus another kid that just has more chill, more resilient. I mean, it's not about, I don't want to say resilience, but there's a resilient factor in there. But what affects one may not affect the other, but then you have this one that won't even go to school because they get so much anxiety. It's crazy when you start unbinding them and teaching them even just really basic skills, where they're like, oh, life doesn't have to be so hard, the world doesn't have to be so scary.
I mean, it would be kind of cool if that was like part of your curriculum, right?
Yes.
But a lot of this comes down to I like how you mentioned resources. Because I do see it like as a privilege that like I can even go and see people like you, and this is stuff I couldn't do 10 years ago because I could barely buy groceries.
Yeah.
So a lot of it does come down to resources. But like, what was my question? Where am I going with this? It'll come to me. I have notes. But I also noticed that a lot of people who have experienced severe trauma also kind of live in that poverty cycle as well, which also kind of lives in an addiction cycle too. Like, have you noticed any correlation between that? Or what about like people who are listening who are like, I can't go drop, $100 a week, or even, go on a $10,000 excursion.
Sure.
Do you kind of get what I'm saying?
Totally. The thing that I love about the digital age is that if no one ever went to therapy, there's so many free resources on YouTube.
Yeah. Oh, TikTok's getting so good too.
TikTok is, yes. And I watch sometimes people in their lives. I'm like, I should do a couple lives and just help some people get some equilibrium. But just like any Bessel or Gabors or Peter Levine, he's another big giant in the somatic field and also somatic therapy and trauma recovery. But there's so many, you could type in somatic exercises And there's now, like, instead of one video where you had to like comb to find it, there's like 20 people being like, oh, you know, move the body like this, wiggle the body like this, or like focus on this kind of breathing, you know, practice somatic breathing. And so there's so many free resources. What I've found is it's not that they're not out there, it's if people will do them.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's just an interesting thing about psychology. If it's almost too easy, they won't do it.
This is true.
Isn't that interesting?
Well, I'm like, give me the program, like, I'm gonna have to study for this, like, I want it to be hard,
Yeah.
you know?
And the irony is unbinding. No, I will work on muscles, and there's some really hard ones to unbind. And I'm like, hey, you're gonna have to breathe through this. This is gonna hurt a little bit, but on the other end of this, it's gonna feel way better.
Yeah, most of the time body work isn't pleasant.
Isn't pleasant, right?
Yeah.
But on the other end of it, they're like, wow, I just feel so much better. I worked on this. He's a little dancer, this little guy. The first time I worked on him, he was like, what is happening? What did you just do to my body? Because I did one side and then I had him go walk to the door and I had him come back and he was like, I had no idea I had that much tension in my body. I'm like, well, you dance for like 4 hours a day and you're young, like you're using the heck out of your body. We just didn't understand, we're used to holding tension, right? And we're used to holding emotional tension and mental tension as well. And until we really get connected to that, that's why I love the sound table, is that people can really feel their baseline, like, oh, I didn't realize just how stressed I was, or wow, I didn't realize just how tense I was, because it pulls the body into that theta state, which is a calm state. When you look at brain waves, theta and delta waves are the like ones that we either are in deep rest or deep sleep, okay? And you pull people into those states and they start to really see what their baseline is and how much tension they're actually holding on their body in all aspects. And then you can teach them how to unwind that tension. And there's a lot of things that people can do for themselves on their own time without having to buy expensive tools. I would tell people, if you really want to, like, if you don't have money to go to therapy or you don't even have insurance, because there's a lot of group practices out there, like our group practice takes 10 different insurances. We worked really hard so people could use their insurance benefits. But if you just can't, if you don't want to get there, you just can't get there, you can't afford it, YouTube the heck out of stuff, like coping skills for trauma, somatic breath exercises, somatic movement exercises for trauma, healing and repairing trauma, Bessel-van-der-Kolk, healing and repairing trauma. There's so much out there that if you just start listening, you could learn 10 new tools in 2 short months.
Yeah,
it
that's
could just help you.
Super true. You know, sometimes when I'm struggling too, is I'll just like say a little prayer to God, the universe, whatever you guys are feeling out there, and I'm like, I know people are triggered by the word God. We could do a whole podcast on that, but I will just be like, okay, just show me something that'll help, so that I don't have to come through information. And I get messages through videos and stuff all the time, and I'm like, that's exactly what I needed to hear, or that was exactly the missing piece.
That's what we call serendipity. And I think it exists in the world. I think that when our bodies are these intuitive vessels, when we ask and we're searching, I think we find. Because it wants its equilibrium. It wants to find its happy. The body doesn't want to be in distress. When we look at addiction, and I'm not saying, I won't say like concretely, like if you're in addiction, then you have trauma, but there's a really high correlation in everyone that I work with that's coming out of recovery, that's coming out of their IOPs.
What is an IOP?
It's an intensive outpatient program. So
okay. They're
working through doing some intensive, whether they're in residential or intensive outpatient, and then they move to what's called more just outpatient.
Yeah.
And
I actually went and looked at a bunch of outpatients therapies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're just more intensive, like you're going multiple hours a day and you're going multiple days a week, versus outpatient, you can go 1 day a week.
Yeah.
You kind of decide your pace. But all the ones, recovery centers that are doing it well will create a wrap. It's like IOPs are about 4 to 6 months. They'll, as people are getting done with their IOP, they'll start to be like, hey, let's get you resourced in the community so that you can continue your therapy. And almost always people are doing trauma work. And when you look at, it's not a top-down approach. You gotta go bottom-up. If you really wanna heal and repair the system, you can try and go top-up, but then all this injurious scar tissue is gonna still stay alive. So you gotta go bottom.
Well, I'm going viral on TikTok right now, so you get a lot of like people that are smarter than you making comments, you know?
Yeah.
But I do say 99% of the comments are like insanely amazing. Like there are some fucking cool people in this world.
Yeah.
You get the 1%, and the comment I get a lot is, well, you know, you should figure out why you drink like that. And I'm like, well, no shit.
Yeah, no, hello.
Yes.
But, yeah, well, and a simple answer to addiction is it's either self-soothing, blunting, coping, right? Or numbing.
Yeah.
It almost always, when somebody gets to a place where we're not just drinking casually or using a substance recreationally, because I'm not going to say that all use, like there's been substances, you know, forever, and not every single person on this planet's been addicted to them, right? So why is that? So when you start to deal with addiction, there almost always is, I'm using this to numb or cope, right? And when you watch babies grow up, they all develop self-soothing skills. And those are either reinforced or not taught at all, right? And so it's really important to teach kids self-soothing skills and emotional regulation skills so they have a tolerance for emotional debris, because you're inevitably going to experience it as a human being. And when your tolerance is low, you're going to look for blunting and coping and numbing much more quickly than just going, there's going to be an end to this. I'm in a dark tunnel now, but there's always the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm going to get there. Like, I truly believe at some point there's going to be an end of this, so I just need to kind of work through it and breathe through it and metabolize it, right? And when you don't have the tolerance, now, to be fair, sometimes your tolerances are blown because you have 17 things happening in your life at once. I just had a baby and I have to go to work and I now have to pull a 50-hour week, and it's just like so much pressure.
I call that like situational depression, because I experienced that right after I had Caden, you know, and I'm like, I need help. I'm like, my husband's at war, which he was in active Afghanistan war, and you know, I'm a couple of weeks postpartum, and I'm like, nobody's helping me, no one's listening to me. So you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So the thing about, I would say, just to pick back up about addiction too, is, and because sometimes people are like, wow, I was just recreationally using, and sometimes the traumas happen when they're in the addiction, right? Because then you start to get into situations, oftentimes in addictions, where you're really compromising. You're just not you. You're not acting like you. You turned off your frontal cortex, which is your
it just keeps going.
thinking.
It's like you just keep cycling it,
and
cycling
so you get
it,
yourself
building
sometimes
it.
in very much terrible situations, and so sometimes the traumas that people are healing from are the traumas that occurred in the addiction.
Oh, that hits home for sure.
Yeah.
So it's like a giant, just like snowball. You're just picking up more and more and more.
Yeah.
But really, you're just trying to be loved.
Yeah. Because I mean, some people are like, well, I didn't have childhood trauma, but I got addicted to pain pills because I had an injury, right? And so you're not trying to come and be like, no, you've had childhood trauma. Where is it? You know, they might have had a pretty like okay life, and then they got a bad injury, and then the opiates. That's why, you know, there's so much now regulation on the opiates, because and there ought to be on a lot of the controlled substances, because they are addictive by nature. Even people who misuse benzos. You know, benzos were never meant for long-term consumption. And I'm saying that carefully. I'm not a doctor. I'm a therapist. But in all the 2 decades I've watched people use them, they're meant for short-term use. And then you resource, right? You build skills and you work through the events that are happening that make you want to calm your nervous system down very quickly, right? But over time, you know, those have been abused, and people are on these high doses, and then they're wondering why I had brain fog and not thinking clearly, and you know, it's these slippery slopes. Yeah.
Oh, it's such a slippery slope.
When I went through my divorce, I was like waking up at 3 a.m. and it wasn't even a bad divorce. Like, me and my ex-husband are great friends. Like, we co-parent well, but it's just like these like massive life changes, right? It's an event that's going. I certainly didn't predict that this was going to happen 11 years later, right? And I remember just waking up at 3 a.m. and being like, what the heck's going to happen with my life? I was just so uncertain, and my body was just not okay. And so I remember going to my doctor and being like, I still have to work. I have to do life. I need something. Gave me Xanax. And it was a really interesting experience to be on the other end of talking about what people were using these meds, and then to be using it. There were times where Sam and I would be driving, and I'd be like, where am I going? I would just lose time.
Yeah.
Like, and I have a very, very quick processing mind. Like, it's part of how I do therapy well. I just have really quick thinking. And I remember there were times I was talking and I would like lose one thought to the next. And I was like, this is not me. And I realized, oh, this is this med. It's impacting my cognitive functioning. And so I was like, nope.
I mean, that's great that you could recognize that. So, you know how I was super sick like 2 weeks ago? And I ran that race really sick, and you did not.
Well, I was not feeling good.
No, I was like, nope, I said I was going to do it.
You did, you muscled through.
Let's talk about that therapy.
Yeah.
But so they prescribed me I was really, really sick though. This was like medicine that I legit needed.
Yeah.
They gave me a muscle relaxer because I had locked both my SI joints, and then I had laryngitis.
Yeah.
So the steroids, and then they gave me the codeine cough syrup,
Mhm.
which instantly I was like, red flag, red flag. She knows me really, really well though, and she's like, I think you're gonna be okay. I'm gonna give you this.
Yeah.
And it's a trust factor here.
Good
I
for
know.
her for
Yeah,
learning that.
yeah, and she goes, I think you're gonna be okay though. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, why would she just say that to me? And I'm in my car and I'm like, oh, it's because I'm an alcoholic. But yeah, that stuff was nice. It was nice to pop a muscle relaxer and then take some codeine cough syrup, and I was just like in la la land.
Yeah.
But I hadn't slept for days. I couldn't walk. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't get a breath in because they put me on steroids too.
Yeah.
And then I realized I was like, oh, I'm probably okay. I was like, how many more days could I take this and it could still be okay?
Yeah.
And I was like,
Thinking,
you fucking addict.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, we can't have this in our house. Then I think that's where my anger started though. I was like, I can't even have cough syrup in my house, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm not super mad about it.
Yeah. Well, and that's to your point, that's where people in recovery and having sobriety have to, there's just this extra caution tape around what it means to be around any kind of substances or people using substances, or something like, hey, you're sick and you need these meds. And so, I've had people that have gone in surgeries and been so adamant, I here's how I have to manage my pain after, because I can't be anywhere close to this. And if you think about it, if the risk for re-injury is so high that you just have to give some safe space away from that, then
Yeah, where people won't take pain pills and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I don't think I could do that.
Is to say, hey, this is how I protect my because it can be, those pathways, you can break neural pathways. Neural pathways bind. Like if I had a piece of sewing string, and I wrapped it around your hand once, you can break it fairly easy. They're not. But if I kept binding it over and over and over again, it's going to get harder and harder to break. So when you're breaking down neural pathways, you can break them down, and over time they can be really dormant and inactive and gone, right? But as you're breaking them down, you can reactivate them very quickly. It's like a trail out in the wilderness is like, oh, I think that this is a deer trail versus a well-worn path, okay? And eventually, if you stop walking on that well-worn path, what's going to happen? Eventually the overgrowth, and it's going to look less and less like a well-groomed trail.
But it's still there.
It's still there.
Yeah.
And so you can totally deactivate neural pathways, but once they've been created, I truly think when you look at neuroplasticity and those kind of things, the brain, it's like those old dilapidated cities. You're like, at any given minute, I could reactivate.
Oh yeah, I call that the slippery slope in addiction for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we were sitting here, let's say we go out to dinner, right?
Yeah.
And maybe they have these lovely espresso martinis, and I could have one espresso martini, legit could.
Yeah.
But what would happen was that weekend, I'd be like, oh well, I had that one espresso martinis. I think it's fine to open this bottle of wine, and I might even pull that off for a whole year.
Yeah.
But I know where it leads.
Yeah. And you may always have to wrap that kind of caution tape around alcohol the rest of your life, Sam. And the cool thing about what you're doing, when I watch even just the way that you've approached running, is that you're taking significant building blocks in your life and creating what I would call really deep. It's like laying really deep bricks in your life around really good adaptive coping mechanisms that eventually really supplant and take place of anything that you were getting out of coping with the substances.
Yeah, I do realize too that I am swapping some addictions for other addictions, but at least they're healthy,
Yeah.
I don't really feel like I'm necessarily an exercise addict or anything like that, or addicted to running, but for sure you should see the way I take down caffeine right now.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't fucking care. I'll deal with that later.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is what I look at when people in recovery, they're like, oh, I'm doing this, but it's bad. And I'm like, you are living your life way better than you ever were, and you actually are reconnected with your kids. You're reconnected with life. Life is when you breathe into life, it can be it's colorful, it's beautiful, right? Even when it's hard, it can have color. When people are in the throes of addiction, it's gray, it's dark, it's and that's why sometimes you see them move the needle to just what's the point? I want to go. I want to leave the planet. Because when you start blunting yourself, you're not just blunting the shitty emotions you don't want to feel. You blunt joy and happiness, so color starts to leave your life, and it's just dull. You know what I'm saying? Because you can't just, it's like you can't isolate and only lose fat on your arms, right? If you're, you know, or like gain weight. It's like it goes across the system. And so if you're blunting and self-medicating, you're going to blunt your joy and happiness. And so that's as hard as it is sometimes in recovery, that's one of the things I think is beautiful is when the world is like, hey, I gotta learn how to emotionally regulate better, and I need to learn how to deal with hard stuff. Look how bright my world is getting. Look how colorful my world is getting as I reconnect to my loved ones and things that matter in my life.
Yeah, every time I like see that hurdle comes, you know, we'll just use our Tuesday. I should probably write this date in my calendar. Tuesday in November, whatever the hell yesterday was. Like, I felt like that was a big hurdle day yesterday. Yeah. And when I get to the other side of it, I'm like, oh, look at all this cool shit, you know?
Yeah, and that's one thing to start continuing to log is at some point I'm going to get on the other side of it. Any dark tunnel eventually has, even the longest dark tunnel has an end to it. And so, but that's why it's so important to build the skills, to have the coping skills, to have emotional regulation skills, and to metabolize. That's one of the things I do a ton of work in my office is process and feel. Just like we digest food, you want to digest these emotions. So when we're doing the trauma work, what's coming up as we review these stories or these movies in our head, we're processing, digesting while we're reclaiming safety, while we're slopping off. And so the body's like, okay, we can reclaim equilibrium. And I think you have to approach the body, not just, you have to do it all. Like the body doesn't work independently. The respiratory system doesn't just function by itself. Like they're all connected. And so our emotional body is very connected to our physical body, and we pay the price when we don't listen to it. Almost always when I see people come in with physical like pains, there's an emotional connection. We're clearing something emotionally. I see it sometimes when someone doesn't want to talk about it, all of a sudden their bodies just get really hot and they're throwing off heat. I'll be like, it's molten lava in here. I didn't turn up the heat. It's just their body needs to slough off the energy.
Yeah.
And so they'll get really hot.
Oh, that's interesting.
And pull off all of that somatic debris, the emotional debris, while we're unbinding the body. And I'll sometimes be like, hey, are you feeling anything right now? And if they're brave and want to, they'll be like, yeah, I'm going through something right now. Or sometimes like, I don't even freaking know. I don't know why I'm emotional. It's actually kind of bugging me. I'm like, just breathe through it. We don't even have to know. Let's just let it go.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't have to know. The body just wants to get it off. So if you open the door, the body as an intuitive vessel will say, thank you, let's release.
Like, thank you, that's perfect, here we go. You can make out with the microphone.
Hello, yeah. Seriously, I just closed my mouth on that.
I think you're basically supposed to like eat them, like that, you know?
I ruined it, it's like, no, it's not complying. There we go, there we go.
Oh, you need more cord?
No, we're good.
Okay. Oh, what do you need over there?
I know, so, you know, it is when you're in recovery and you're going, I've hit my rock bottom, this isn't how I want to live my life anymore. It is a brave journey because it is hard. Mm-hmm. It's easy to stay blunted and sometimes then get to a place where you're like, I don't want to say easy, like your life isn't easy, but to keep blunting yourself, to keep self-medicating and keeping yourself numb versus awakening and dealing with the mess, reconnecting. It's like when people have done surgeries and they've interrupted the nerves. When the nerves come back online, have you ever had that where the nerves have to come back online?
Oh yeah, like when I cut my finger.
It feels weird and it hurts.
Partially off, yeah.
It doesn't, and that's what's happening with people in recovery is they're coming back online and it's painful and it's a pain management and learning skills and it's a really brave venture. Anyone who's in recovery, who's in it is like, okay, I'm gonna do the hard thing and kudos to you. It's a lot of work.
I know, which, you know, there's this like whole mental struggle where you're like, oh, all we're doing is we're not drinking alcohol. So theoretically, you're like, that should be really easy, right? It's like if you all of a sudden find out you can't include it. You're like, it kind of sucks, you want the donut, but like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's not like that at all.
Yeah.
And my mind wants to make it super basic and super simple, and then I'm like, oh my god, this is so fucking hard. Why is this so hard?
That's why so I work with these bodybuilders too at times, and I have such a respect for this like intense amount of muscle pack that they put on their bodies and how hard that is. Mm-hmm. And then I look at how much harder it is for people to do emotional work, like to be vulnerable, to get in the mess. Like it's sophisticated, it's messy, it's not linear. There's not like well, if you do plan A, there's 7 plans here, you just make sure you pick one. There's like 1,000. What works for some person isn't going to work for another person. And so it's tricky, and it's probably, I think, after watching people work really hard on their physical bodies and like get in shape, I think getting in emotional shape and emotionally regulating yourself is so much harder to do. Like, you can change a physical body very quickly within 3 to 6 months. Sometimes what it takes to develop the emotional skills needed to traverse life takes so much longer, and you have to practice it.
Yeah.
Like, you have to work at it. Like, look at how many skills I had at the time when I did that with my son. I was a therapist, and I ripped into him. I was like, okay, like, I'm human, and I did a lot of good repair work, and I'm glad I had the skills, but I was really blown away at the whole process. The observer in me was like, wow, like, that was a very, very, fairly simple micro trauma to try and help him heal from, and look at these people healing from these deep, deep, deep traumas, and coming back from the depths of just total despair, especially when you're in the throes of addiction. Because I don't think I've ever worked with someone that was like, hey, that was going real well for me, right?
I was having a blast.
Yeah,
I was having a blast.
It couldn't have gone better. They usually are like, holy shit, my life was terrible.
Yeah.
And now I'm finding some equilibrium. So.
You know, and it's also a lot of work to just, I know there's people that don't go to AA and things like that, but I'm like, that shit is a lot of work. Especially people that go to a lot of meetings.
Yeah.
I'm like, damn, I applaud you guys.
One way or the other, build the scaffolding. Like, I don't think it always has to be AA or NA. It's nice to have a community. Well, we're beings wired for connection, and so we need community. We need connections, and those connections also keep us accountable, right?
Yeah, AA does 2 big things for me. One is, I'm one of those people, I'm like, no, I said I was here, and so I would be like mortified to not be back the next meeting.
Yeah.
And like, you know, be like, just kidding, let me start over my chips, you know?
Yeah.
Like, that would be mortifying to me. That is awful. And then the second thing too is, which I didn't realize this, and it took me several months in to realize, you think there's something fundamentally wrong with you, and so when you can see that there's something fundamentally wrong with other people as well, all of a sudden you're like, wait, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with me.
Yeah, like we're people trying to figure this out, and you know, like I said, there's such power. Like, we used to be raised in villages, and that's why that's that saying, like, it takes a village. Well, these days we're in these sometimes tiny microcosms of our individual family systems, but sometimes finding community support is really difficult for a lot of people. And so when you're in recovery, there has to be scaffolding. There has to be scaffolding around these very new, it's like baby steps, right? If I were to like have a new wound and I pulled off the bandage and I just exposed it to all of this crap, I'd be like, well, good thing we tried to heal, but I just sunburned it and I got all this dirt on, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're in these new spaces, like you have new skin, and so you have to have scaffolding to protect it. And if you are trying to, like, no, I'm fine, I don't need any of that, it's like, good luck, because this is new skin, and it's very fragile, and it needs to be conditioned over time to be more and more resilient. And that's why I think the scaffolding and the community and the, you know, St. George, I would say, I'm really impressed with the recovery community here, whether it's Premier Counseling, High Desert, Steps, Hope Rising. When they do recovery days, these programs all get together. The recovery community here, like, there's so many people that know each other, and they may be going to IOP at High Desert, but they're going to Ryan Park's breathwork class over at Premier, or his sound bath class. Like, there's an incredible amount of support here. So if you're not using it, I almost am like, it is here. There's a lot of it.
Sometimes you just don't know it's there. So like, for me, like, you know, I just have to Google.
Yeah.
And then what's cool is once you find one place, someone, like, I have all these papers, like, people, they pass out brochures of these things, you guys, they're old school. And all of a sudden I've got like this brochure for somewhere else with the schedule. Yeah, and all of a sudden I've got a phone list, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah. There's an incredible amount of support here. They do recovery days, there's these little retreats that people go to, there's sober softball, there's the meetings, there's events.
Well, you know what's cool about a lot of this stuff too is it doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
You know? Or like, I know AA will do Alcoholics Anonymous, the chapter here, or I don't know how it works. There's lots of chapters.
Yeah.
But they'll do like retreats and things. And I was like, well, how much is it? And it was like, we're keeping the costs really low, and it's over $100 this year. And I was like, for a 4-day retreat, it was like $125. And they were like, they felt bad that
It was 120
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, awesome.
I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know people who pay $10K to go to retreats.
Yeah. So if you ever wonder, if you're feeling alone and you need more, if there's anyone listening that's like, I didn't know that there were so many resources. There is a huge recovery community here, and they are always doing something. Like, I work with a lot of people in recovery because we have a lot of referral partners from the different programs here and recovery centers, and I'm impressed with the community, with the connection, with the camaraderie between programs, and rightly so. There's just, in that kind of world, that you don't need to compete, because you're never going to have enough programs to serve how many people are in addiction. And it's not getting, the trend isn't getting better. You look at the stuff that's happening with fentanyl and meth and some of the other stuff, and you're going, okay, those numbers continue to supersede our ability to like have enough resources out there.
I know, not to make this political, but I'm hoping that some of this new legislation, for lack of a better word, or I guess parties that are coming in, that's one thing J.D. Vance talks a lot about, is the fentanyl crisis and how it's just like pouring over the borders. And I'm kind of interested to see if it starts trending down maybe in the next decade.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see. It's a big deal. Like I'm having conversations with my teenagers that my parents, we grew up, I'm 46.
Okay,
so we grew up
you're
in
46, I'm 39, but
Yeah.
what was your drug in high school?
It was Red Ribbons and
What is Red
their program.
No, but what was the drug that everyone was doing like in high school that they were
I grew up in Provo, so
yeah, so did I.
So it was like marijuana. Like, it was never. I definitely wasn't like hearing about heroin and fentanyl.
Oh, ours was ecstasy and
I did hear about that one.
like somas, muscle relaxers.
Somas, yeah. So I've had to sit my kids down and go like, hey, 3 grains of sand of this stuff is lethal, and you don't know it's gonna. You can't just like take your friend's pill that said they got it from grandma's. It's from my grandma's, fine and safe.
No, hold on. Have you listened to the Theo Vaughn and JD Vance podcast?
No, I need to listen to that.
JD's like, as a vice presidential candidate, well now, they won, but he was like, I shouldn't say this. And he's like, you can't just do Coke in America anymore.
Yeah.
And like Theo's like trying to word it,
Yeah.
And he's like, let's just say it how it is. He's like, you used to be able to go to a party and maybe one time you did Coke and you were like, hee hee hee.
Sure.
And he's like, now you're like, could be dead.
Yeah, you could be rolling the dice. I have conversations with my kids and I'm like, man, be safe, and I'm not joking. Like I can't believe how young some of these kids are dying from fentanyl overdoses.
You need to go back and listen to that episode.
Yeah. They didn't even know they weren't even trying to take fentanyl.
Mm-hmm.
They were just taking something they thought was something different.
Yeah. Well, they're kind of joking, but they're like, yeah, you can't even do Coke in America anymore.
Even with the wave and the movement that's coming in with psychedelic assisted therapy, and you start to look at what I would call these sacred molecules that can really help heal and repair when they're used properly, even then you're going, you don't want to source, you just source, when people source that and they tell me that they're doing psychedelics or psychedelic assisted therapy, I'm like, make sure you're
Well, I talked about this on our last podcast. I have lost several close friends. I just call them spiritual drug addicts now, because they say that they're, doing these journeys. And I'm like, girl, you're like shooting up, what's the stuff that everyone's into? I think you do it.
The ketamine?
Ketamine.
Yeah.
You do it. That sounded bad.
I know. I was like, wait, what?
And I'm like,
space, yes, for people who are doing the ketamine.
But yeah, I'm like,
yeah.
I have a friend who's consistently in the hospital now, and I'm like, just literally injecting ketamine every day.
Well, just like anything, right? Ketamine, ketamine's a dissociative, it's less psychoactive than like psilocybin, but I could do a whole nother podcast about ketamine. Some of the way it's being used is so injurious. It's not like, you don't give someone a shot, leave them alone on a couch in a white ball room and go, hey, good luck.
You also don't need to do ketamine every day.
You don't need to do ketamine, and ultimately, listen, if you're trying to heal and repair trauma and you want to move the needle on getting some stuff done without the overwhelming reactivity that can come with the fear or having to view and have this emotional intensity, like these what I call these kind of sacred molecules help you look at stuff in a more, the power of ketamine is a dissociative medicine, and so it helps you look at things with neutral energy. It's a neutral. And so if you're neutral, then you can look at something that was really hard and go, oh, and then healing and repairing from it without all that emotional debris around it can So these are meant to create magnificent movement in healing and repairing. And if you're not using them that way, then why are you using them?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
there's a difference between like going to therapy and like having a licensed therapist like take you through this traumatic event using ketamine versus shooting it up in your bathroom.
Yeah. That
Like
seems
plain
like
and simple.
numbing and blunting, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so and the neurochemistry, right? The blanketing of the neurotransmitters, the calming it. Like our brain can either be hot or when you're depressed, the brain is like shutting down, right? And when you're anxious, the brain's ramping up. So like ketamine as a medicine can come in and like really like blanket those neurotransmitters and calm the brain one way or the other. But when it's used in a way that, I mean, I've had people come in and they've been like, I did ketamine treatment and I don't feel okay. Like I had so much come up so fast. Because again, these things will mine, they're gonna mine stuff. You're gonna mine stuff in your psyche. So you don't have help with that. When ketamine first came out years ago, I was a part of some of the follow-up sessions and I couldn't believe how many people weren't getting follow-up therapy. I was like, you are seeing some pretty intense stuff.
Well, and they're just doing them in big houses that some girl rented and claims she's a shaman, you know? Because I've been there, I've done those. I've never done ketamine, but the first time I did a psilocybin journey was like a big house that they had rented and they were like taking us through this journey. But I feel really grateful because there were some people there who had like full breakdowns. So I was like, what is going on? And you're tripping on medicine, so you're like, why is, not medicine, but that's what they call it.
Yeah.
Drugs, you're tripping on drugs. And I'm like, why is that guy freaking the fuck out, you know? But I had a really interesting experience where I had a giant filing cabinet that came up through the floor, and it was like I don't know who, you know, whatever I was seeing, would flip through and pull a file out and ask me if I wanted to look at it. And then we would open it and I would like kind of experience the experience from a neutral perspective. And then this giant file cabinet was like moving so fast. It would go again. And I would say yes or no. And there was some stuff where I was like, nope.
Isn't that cool that in all of that, you still were able to utilize your free agency, right? Free agency was honored. I think there's such a big piece of that in healing and repair is here's what I'm ready for, here's what I'm not. And then our job as as a mental health provider that helps hold space is to help create safety in that space and go, hey, let's not, right? Or hey, do you think that we need to and you're just avoiding it because it's going to be painful and I'm here, you're in a safe place, you know what I'm saying? So having the discernment to go, oh, let me help you with this, or hey, let's not ever look at that and just move on.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that every file has to be reviewed and I don't think that every story has to be retold over and over again. What we care about is the nervous system healing and repairing, because if it is, you'll know. You can tell, because your life you just start to feel like you have more equilibrium. You're more grounded, you're more balanced, your bandwidth fills, like you can handle stress and it's not blowing you out of the water all the time, right? Nervous system tension is obvious. You just know if you're healing from it or not. You know if you're bogged down with it or not.
Oh, I like that. Okay, this is my last question for you. Okay. How does Jennie, I was like, Jennie, I've never probably heard that one before, have you?
All the time, yeah.
You know, people used to say to me all the time, they don't that much anymore, but they'd be like, do you like green eggs and ham?
Yeah.
They wanted me to say, I do not like them, Sam, I am. Yeah, I'm like, rah, rah, rah. But how does Jennie, take care of Jennie?
I finally just got back into doing way more self-care for myself. So after my last baby, he's 5 now, I just was doing a lot. I was working 10, 12-hour days. I had 3 different jobs, and then I built Mend, my counseling, group practice. And when you talk about depletion, and I had easy pregnancies. That last pregnancy was not easy, and I actually had a near-death experience. Like I flatlined on the table for 90 seconds. Oh. And I got shoved back into my body.
Do you remember any of it? Do you have any cool stories?
Yeah, I have some cool stories. They're long, so.
Oh, dang it.
I definitely believe in life after death.
Dang
I'll
it.
tell you that.
I love those kinds of stories.
Yeah, I studied actually near-death experiences as a part of my grad school project. And
I love reading books about them. I love this shit.
I think that there's something after this, but having my own experience, I was like, yep, for sure, because I didn't die. I was going somewhere else.
Did you go somewhere else?
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I interacted with people, and then I eventually was like,
what kind of people?
They were people that I couldn't tell you. It was like Julie and Eric. It was like I knew that they were my family, people that were connected to me. And literally at one point I was like, this is real nice here. I remember saying that, seeing all of my kids and being like, they have so many people that love them. And I was not distressed at all about staying. I was like, I think I'm going to stay here. This is real nice. I was like, and they were like, nope, and shoved me. And I was like, boom, back in my body. And and I was thrown so hard. This is the cool thing, like, about understanding how the magnetic force in our bodies keeps our, like, literally our soul in our body. Because it was so fast, I was so disoriented that my brain was working, but I literally was so, like, I could not talk. I tried talking about and I couldn't say anything. So there, I went and didn't have a baby, to I went under, and then I woke up to having had the baby.
Yeah.
And so my partner Bo was like bouncing the baby. There's like 30 people in the room, and there's just chaos. I was like, and I couldn't talk. And so
where did that baby come from?
Seriously, I kept trying to talk and I couldn't. And I was like, why is my brain working? And I can't say anything. So then I started getting frustrated, and they were saying a million things to me. This one guy was like, what day is it? What time is it? How old are you? And at one point, Bo, he's my guy, he's like, stop talking to her.
They're just trying to assess where you were at, and he's like, just leave her alone.
He's like, oh my god, like, I asked those questions to her. So anyway, finally I locked eyes on my doctor, and he like walked over here, and he's like, so something happened, you stopped breathing, and I was like, just tears, because I couldn't do anything else. I was like, well,
yeah,
I don't know when I'll start talking again, but if I've lost my voice, I'm gonna be really mad.
Okay, well, you have to take me. I was gonna say we could go out for wine, but we're gonna go get a latte.
Mocktails.
A latte.
Yeah, I'll tell you all about it.
And you can tell me all about it.
Yeah. So when you look at people reclaiming equilibrium, and you look at people wanting to heal and repair their nervous system, just you can really trust that the body is an intuitive vessel. And all the time that I've done this work, I can tell you, after working on thousands of bodies and counseling now thousands of people, is the body is self-healing. It can self-repair. That's why we heal from wounds. So if we will let the body heal from our emotional wounds, it will direct us.
There's like an actual baby crying. Can you hear it?
I can hear it. Hey, baby. So when you go in and you see that part of you that's going, hey, here, or look here, that's your intuitive vessel going, this is what we want to attend to.